Alright, this is another video, guys. This one's going to be about, again, creation versus evolution. I don't really like making these videos, but I know that it is something that a lot of you guys struggle with. So I'm just going to talk about it briefly again. I don't know how brief. Last time I said brief, it ended up being an hour long. I just want you guys to know one thing, that there's nothing in this life that we can know. There's a philosopher by the name of Rene Descartes, and he formulated his theory of I think, therefore I am, using what's called the Cartesian doubt. And I'm a firm believer in skepticism. I reply to people and I tell people I'm a moderate skeptic, which is we can never know anything. I don't believe that I know anything. Everything that I hold in my life are all beliefs. Certainly some beliefs have more validity than others, and some beliefs may be true, but I have no way of knowing which of my beliefs are true. The only thing that I can say is that God helps me understand and is continuing to show me what I believe is true. In other words, there's certain patterns in my life that I see, and there's certain things that happen in my life, or that rather God causes to happen to help me understand that I'm on the right track and that I've believed in the right thing. That's why I uploaded the whole "How Much Does God Love Jesus" series, because I mean it's basically God showing us that He exists in everywhere, especially in nature. And I want people to really watch that series, because if you watch that series, you start getting an understanding that science and God are not contradictory, that everything that God does, He doesn't intend to hide Himself. We know that in the past God has hidden Himself from His people, but that was during their disobedience, and that's so they would seek Him out. But if you seek the truth, you will find it. And God says, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. Honestly, guys, like, if you really are looking for the truth, God will bring the truth your way. If you ask God for something, He's going to do it. I tell people all the time, and I hope I'm going to start making another series of the things that God does in my life. Like, I mean, you guys don't really understand. Like, if you're an atheist, you don't understand how it is to be a Christian. It's not as though we just believe in this thing and God is some sort of taskmaster that we serve with unfailing devotion. Like, that's not the way it works. When we tell you guys that we're in a relationship with Jesus Christ and God, the whole Christianity thing is a relationship. You guys, if you've ever been in a relationship, then you understand. At our moment of doubts, God is there, and He answers and He talks to us the way He does and the way He has been for thousands of years. So there's really nothing that people can do to sway me from believing in Jesus, because He's there, and He's the only one there. Like, He's the only one possible that can be there in our hardest times, because He's the only one that understands. So it's not so much for Christians, at least. Like, this isn't going to be like a physical thing. Of course, I'm going to talk about physical things here in a little bit. But for Christians, I just want you guys to understand, who is it that's been there in your time of hardship? You guys know, man, like, God is a very specific person. Like, every time He does things, He seems to do things right in the nick of time. It would be just like if you're falling from a building, God will save you on the first story rather than catching you before you fall. You see what I'm saying? Like, He wants to show you in the very last minute that He can do everything. And that's the only way you know it's Him. So you guys have to understand that when God rescues, He rescues in the nick of time to show you it was impossible. It's impossible by your own efforts. Only He can do it. And He's been doing that for so long. You know what I'm saying? Like, He's always done that. You know, like, He waited for the Egyptians. The Egyptians had to catch up to Israel, and it looked like they were going to overtake them. But then what do? God parts the Red Sea. He has them cross, and then He has the Red Sea collapse on the Egyptians. He rescued in the nick of time. You know what I'm saying? And that's something to build y'all's faith. God rescues in the nick of time. You don't think something's going to work out, and God works it out at the last minute. He's doing that to build your faith and to show you that everything is under His power, everything is under His control. Just trust Him. And this is the biggest thing is this is going to give you reasons to trust him. But again, none of us know how old the earth is. That's what this video is going to be about, is how old the earth is. None of us know how old it is, and I believe none of us can know. If you ask yourself basic questions like, how do I know my name? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say my name was Bob. How do I know my name is Bob? Well, I trust my parents that they did the right thing. How do they know that I'm the right Bob? You know what I'm saying? You got to trust the nurses that they did their job in the hospital. They're doing everything correctly in order to bring me home. You can't know. This is the biggest thing, is that human beings, you have to understand, we live by faith. Even though we don't understand that we live by faith, we do live by faith. Even if you conduct a million experiments, it doesn't make a difference. Like, this is the biggest thing that I want anybody to watch this understanding is, everything is faith. Everything is faith. Now I'm going to talk about certain special instruments that they use in order to find out the age of the earth. How do you know those instruments are running correctly? How do you know the person that created them with the proper things in mind? Like, it gets worse once you start using instruments to measure stuff, because then it's like, oh wow, this is ridiculous. Like, human beings are not perfect, and human beings fail. So much more so, the things that human beings make, they're capable of failure. So I want you guys to understand that everything that we do in this life is faith. But nobody wants to admit that. None of us live as though we have faith. In fact, we're so confident, we say we know something. And, you know, science has been, people from a scientific background, people from any sort of background have been saying that for years. If you guys study Socrates, said the same thing. Like, he went out to discover what justice was. He talked to the people that were supposed to know about justice, and he said the people that were supposed to know about justice knew less about justice than anyone he had ever met. And it's the same thing in science. Like, people could have sworn the earth was flat based on their observations, and then come to find out pictures are taken out of space and the earth is round. And that's if you trust that. Cartesian doubt is really, really, really harsh, bro. Like, if you actually sit down and ask yourself, what is it that I know? You see what I'm saying? Like, go back. Do you even look at your birth certificate? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's something very significant. Your name. One thing. What's your name? How do you know that? You can go back, ask your parents. They can tell you, hey, this is the birth certificate. And then you can say, oh, okay, well, cool. But then also you have to trust that you didn't get switched at birth, that the nurse did the proper job in taking you to the right room with that little bracelet that you had on your wrist when you were a kid. That's ridiculous. One mistake there, and we know human beings make mistakes constantly. Like, if you have a job, how many mistakes do you make at your job? All the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could be putting lettuce on a burger, and there's like a little piece of shredded cheese in the lettuce that goes with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you put some lettuce on the burger, there's a little bit of shredded cheese on the lettuce. Now you have a burger with not only shredded lettuce but shredded cheese. Like, that's not supposed to be there. We make mistakes constantly, and we just have to trust that everything worked out, and that is the proper name. You see what I'm saying? Like, and then some people, I have a friend, his name is Jeff. He didn't know the proper spelling of his name until he looked at his birth certificate when he was in high school. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy. He had been spelling his name incorrectly for maybe, 10 years of his life, assuming he learned to write at 4 years old, 5 years old. So that's crazy, dude. Like, imagine spelling your name improperly for those years. How did that happen? You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is something even crazier. Like, people are trying to convince you the earth is millions and billions of years old. Now I'm going to try to help you guys understand, they don't know how old the earth is. Nobody can know how old the earth is. The only one who knows how old the earth is God. Because he's the only one that can know anything. All us human beings, all we have is our faith. And we stick firmly by that faith. So I can tell you, none of us are going to do the experiments. None of us are going to hold the thing that measures radioactivity, a Geiger counter. None of us are going to hold the Geiger counter while we're doing that. We can pay to get the experiments done, but we're not performing the experiments ourselves. Like, let's say I wanted to find out how old the Earth is. I grab a sample of potassium argon. I take that to a person, and then that person is then going to radiometrically date that sample. I'm not going to perform that experiment. I'm not going to hold those things in my hand, and someone else is going to do it. I'm going to have to trust he's doing his job correctly. I'm going to have to trust that the experiment, not the experiment. Well, the experiment's foundational support has value. I'm going to have to trust that the tools used in that experiment are also running correctly. There's a lot of things that I have to trust if I get that one piece of thing radiometrically dated, and I don't trust any of that. Like, I'm letting you know that right now, the only thing that I have right now is my faith in God. And I experiment with that on a daily basis. Is God trustworthy? And I believe he is. And I want every Christian to watch this video to ask yourself, this is stupid. Like, why am I going to trust somebody that doesn't even care about me over God? You know what I'm saying? Like, ask yourself, does that person, those people trying to convince you the earth is millions and billions of years old, do they know you? Do they care about you? Have they been there during the hard times? No. Why on earth would you trust them over God? This is just for Christians. Now, I'm going to talk more about the specific details on why, because, man, if God helps me formulating theories and hypotheses, I guarantee you, man, like, I'm a conflict-oriented person, and God helps me throw shade, as it were, on theories like a ton. Like, I find something wrong in everything. And this is what this video is going to be about. It's going to be about radiometric dating. So if you guys don't understand how people come to the conclusion that the Earth is millions and billions of years old, they do it through radiometric dating. And simply put, it has to do with half-lives. If you guys have ever taken an entry-level biology course, they teach you this at the end of the course. And it's pretty much this, like, so let's just say carbon-14. Carbon-14 dating is different from radiometric dating on samples, like I told you about potassium argon. That's totally different than carbon-14 dating because that has to do with a different mechanism. It's still basically the same. They're counting half-lives, but they count it differently. Carbon-14 dating has to do with once alive organisms. So they're now dead, but they used to be alive. And potassium argon dating, that has to do with samples. So carbon-14, carbon, that's not its normal number. Carbon's normal number is 12, and carbon-14 is a radioactive isotope. So what they do is carbon-12 in the atmosphere, any carbon is turns into carbon-14 in the atmosphere, and then of course that comes down to Earth. Human beings then eat that. Like, any sample of carbon-12 that you can find, there's a chance that it could have a piece of it could be carbon-14, and that has to do with the radiation from the sun that hits it, and it makes it radioactively alive, so to speak. Animals eat that. When the animal dies, then the half-life starts, because as an animal continually lives, it continues to eat the same ratio, as it were, of carbon-14, and then carbon-12 to carbon-14. Once it dies, it stops intaking that, and then that's when the counting starts. It's totally different than just a sample. Like, I can find some potassium, and some of that potassium could be argon. Like, potassium argon starts off as potassium and it turns into argon, which is the radioactive element part of it. But just a few things to help you guys understand. These things, half-lives, are ridiculous. Like, I don't even believe the Earth is just now, I believe, turning 5,777 years. That's based on the Hebrew calendar, and this is based on history. I don't take their wild years, because again, I believe human beings were the zenith, the highest point of God's creation, and I believe that happened according to God's plan. In 6 days, God created everything, and on the 7th day, he rested. And there's specific reasons I believe that. God showed me what numbers mean, and once you start adding millions and billions of years, then God's symmetry and God's beauty in the numbers fall apart. So there's a specific reason I don't believe in the whole millions and billions of years, because as a Christian you could just say, oh, those days mean millions and billions of years, because the Bible says 1,000 years is like one day to God. So a billion years, million years, who cares? I don't believe that. Like I trust that God made those things in 6 days, because then I have a specific eating plan. Like I have a specific diet that I follow, and if I try to follow it by millions and billions of years, I would never eat. I eat whatever God created on that day is what I'm allowed to eat, and the seventh day I don't eat anything. So right now, today's a Friday. I don't eat anything today because Jesus rested. God rested on the seventh day. Jesus specifically, he died on the cross. He rested this day, and I don't eat celebrating that because Jesus he didn't eat that day. And I guess the first day you have water, second day you have water, third day is fruitful. A lot of people don't understand God's pattern. That's part of God's pattern. So I'm not allowed to eat until Monday. So I just want you guys to understand something very basic. If I was trying to follow God's pattern of specifically his creation and diet, I wouldn't be able to do it. That would be millions and billions of years. I would just have to fast the rest of my life and die. So specifically, I have a vested interest in believing there's specific days because I'm only allowed to eat on those specific days. If they're millions and billions of years, then there's no food for me. But that's just besides the point. Like I just want you guys to understand why I believe that there's specific days. And I can show you about numbers. Like if I show you numbers and you're like, oh snap, like God always does this. Like numbers are very significant to God. Numbers are the simplest, they're the simplest things. Like numbers, they're the simplest they're the simplest. I would say they're the simplest, but they can be the most complex. But they're the simplest demonstration that God has for us. Because numbers don't exist. Numbers are just they're a concept. So they're the simplest concepts, and God showed me what that means. And there's no way there's millions and billions of years old, because then He's not in harmony anymore. But either way, like that's a whole nother video. But I just want you guys to understand that if God says he created the earth in 6 days, he created the earth in 6 days. That's if you can trust him. Now, can you trust him? Yeah. I want you guys to understand that all science is based on observation. So first it starts off in the mind. It's great in the mind. It's awesome. Like you can theorize anything you want. Like there's nothing against theories. You know what I'm saying? I love theories. Like I hypothesize about things in the Bible all the time. I have a bunch of theories of God. I have theories of numbers. You know what I'm saying? And as I live life, I experience that. And it's the same way, like with science. Science is theories being put to the test. So it's based on theories that are, you get theories based on observation. Theories don't come out of thin air. You observe something, you make a theory, and then you propose an experiment, you perform the experiment, you analyze the data, and then you report your findings. That's what science is. So number one, we're going to start with the first level of science, which is observation. Now, if I'm going to tell you right now, I have one good eye and one bad eye. You know what I'm saying? My left eye, it's going to appear to you guys, even this is beautiful, because right now on video, it looks like my right eye is closed. No, on video, it's going to look like my left eye is closed, but it's actually my right eye. You guys understand, like, observation is different when you're facing somebody. Your right is their left and their left is your right. So you guys think I have my left eye closed, but it's really my right eye. Now all you have to do is just turn around, face yourself the right way, and you'll see, hey, his left eye's closed. That's right. And that's something really beautiful about life, is even in the simplest demonstration, your sense of perception can deceive you really easily. Now, I know you guys, have you ever guys been driving while you're tired? All of a sudden you see a black shadow dart out of nowhere. Did that really happen? You have no way of knowing, but you know that possibly not. Have you ever guys been sleepy and you're talking to somebody and that make absolutely no sense? Like our sense of perception is totally whack. You stick a pencil inside of a water, and this is all based on, again, all of it has already been there. Like I'm just repeating things that have already been there. You guys, if you seek and you try to really find the truth, God will lead you to where you need to go. God led me to philosophy. And through philosophy, I was able to understand that, wow, human beings have been struggling with these same issues for thousands of years. But anyway, you stick a pencil inside of water, that pencil looks like it's bent. And that has to do with light refracting off the water and then that makes a pencil look like it's bent even though it's not. Based on observation, your eyes or your sense of perception has already deceived you. So the first level of science, which is before you even set a theory, is observation. Before you set the theory, your observation is already fallible. Your observation is already invalid in terms of perfect understanding, in terms of perfect knowledge. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the ability to doubt. Because anyone who's watching this video possibly is doubting that the earth was created in 6 days. But anyone who's watching the video may be judging too harshly or whatever. I want you guys to judge your own beliefs. Like if you're an atheist, judge your beliefs. Your sense of perception is already off, and that's what those theories are based off of. Now, I want you guys to understand that radiometric dating, that didn't exist in the time of Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, like I've already said before, did not even know about genetics. Genetics and evolution were a competing theory at the time of its conception. Gregor Mendel, he hated Charles Darwin. He was hoping to run into him so he can tell him just how wrong he was. Because evolution does not work through genetics. Those theories were married in the 1950s when we started discovering more about genetics. Because Darwinism is proven false. Like they modified Darwin's theory. Again, this is all simple stuff. Like you guys can look it up. Darwin's theory was proven false. He didn't know the mechanisms of anything. All he proposed was natural selection, and we know it doesn't work through natural selection. Like he was thinking, hey, these birds have soft beaks, and these birds' beaks are slightly different from other birds' beaks, so this must mean that over time they could change species. But the beaks of the bird don't stay soft. And also, like one crazy thing that I don't know how it didn't occur to him. If you're looking at finches, like Darwin's finches, that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Birds can fly, buddy. Like, migration exists. If they can't find food on one island, guess what they'll do? Migrate to a different island. They're not all going to die, and all of a sudden new species are going to arise. Like, this guy was so intellectually stunted. Like, and I don't know, like, you guys just read this stuff and you guys don't find anything wrong with it. I find things wrong with absolutely everything. Like, I poop all over theories all the time, and that's my thing. I'm a conflict-oriented person. Like, if he's basing his entire theory based on different beaks, like different beak thickness and different beak like length, the guy's an idiot. You know what I'm saying? Like, birds can fly from one island to another, and he formed this whole theory. Which, again, I have nothing against theories, but we know. I mean, look at Arnold Schwarzenegger. I use him a lot, but he wasn't born super buff. You know what I'm saying? Like, your body is able to adjust. It doesn't adjust over generations. It adjusts in this life. Like, his basic observation was ridiculous. And I think that I'll talk about epigenetics in a later video, but guys, epigenetics absolutely destroys the foundation for evolution. Like, we are built to survive. You know what I'm saying? It was not something that we gradually earned. And again, you don't earn it. Like, everything's random. But we were built to survive. Everything that God knew everything that we were going to go through. And in our genes are codes, programs. I call them programs. Like, I tell people all the time, like, especially people trying to lose weight, you want your body to run the right program in order for you to see the body that you want to see. And our body does this. Like, I've experienced this. I've experimented this in my own life. Like, I used to be able to run miles. Like, I used to run a half marathon on the drop of a hat. I said, I'm going to go running. I put my MP3 player on, and I didn't stop running until it ran out of battery. Like, and it ended up being, I think, like 2 miles to get there, and then 11 miles running, and then 2 miles back. That was easy for me. Like, I could do that because I didn't have a car. I just got a car recently, so I never had a car. I would run everywhere. And my cardiovascular system, it ran those specific programs, and my entire body was made to run those programs. Like, it followed that particular area. Like, my body basically adapted to that stress. And it didn't do it over generations. It did it instantaneously. Like, in my lifetime, in my generation. It's the same with birds. Like, if they have fast-darting beaks, this is Darwin's finches. If they have fast-darting beaks and there's no insects, like a cold snap kills all the insects, guess what they're going to do? They're going to start hitting the ground with their beaks, and they're going to look for seeds, or they're going to look for worms. And their beaks are going to get harder. because that's what they're built to do. That, like, in your genes are certain programs that you run, and that's what people do. Like, why do people get fat? They start running a program to conserve fat. Like, they don't run like, their body's not running programs in order to burn fat. Their body's running programs in order to store fat, because they don't have enough energy expenditure needs. Like, if you exercise, your body runs programs in order to prepare you for that future exercise. If you don't exercise, your body's going to run programs to conserve energy. Like, your body's always trying to conserve energy. So it's going to run those programs where you don't burn the fat, where you store the fat. And the same thing, like, when you exercise, your body knows it needs that, so it's going to run those programs to where your muscles are going to either burn the fat or burn the food that you eat, whatever it is. It's different. Like, if you don't eat like, I'm not going to eat for 3 days. My body knows, hey, he's been doing this for 50 days already, so I know now the Friday, so my body's going to run a program in order for me to use that fat on these 3 days. And then the first time I eat, my body's going to be like, hey, I'm going to store this immediately as glycogen in the muscles, because he might need this energy. So it's just programs that your body runs. And I want you guys to understand that he based his whole theory on the fact that birds' beaks could not get any harder. Like, in other words, that birds cannot change. Number one, if I'm a bird and all the insects die, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to fly to another island that does have insects. I'm going to migrate. But if I can't do that, then what am I going to do? I'm going to do what I have to do in order to survive. I'm going to hit the ground with my beak, and I'm going to look for those. Like, it doesn't make a difference. Like, survival, like, that's my thing as a bird. So I'm going to do that. And he proposed that these minute changes somehow led us to have all the variations and all the different kinds of animals that we have here on Earth. That's ridiculous. Like, where on earth could you possibly come up with that? From one minute change, that's like saying, because my fingernails grow, somehow I'm going to eventually grow wings. Doesn't make any sense. Like, absolutely zero sense. But that's the first level of observation. Now I'm going to go to the second level, which is theories. Obviously, you have poor observations, your theories are also going to be flawed. You know what I'm saying? And that's why you test these theories. Like, he did not test a single one of his theories. How could you possibly prove that? You need millions and billions of years in order to prove that. All I can tell you is, as far as I know, and as far as that has been experimented on this earth, in human history, one person it doesn't work that way. Like, genetics won't allow it. You know what I'm saying? You can't possibly experiment with a theory that he proposed, because it's impossible. You need to be alive for millions and billions of years old in order to experiment with that theory, and you can't. But the only thing I can tell you is, I see two Mexican people getting together and they have a Mexican baby. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't expect, and I see two Mexicans getting together and the baby shares the features of the parents and sometimes the grandparents. Like, that's what I see. I don't see descent with modification. I see genetic inheritance. And that's the difference, is you have Darwin's theory of descent with modification, which eventually leads to different species, or you have Gregor Mendel's idea of genetic inheritance, and he saw it, man. He's the one that performed the experiment. He crossed two dwarf pea plants, which is the recessive allele, and they could not reproduce a tall plant no matter how many times they crossed. Not once. So I'm letting you know that those experiments were performed by Gregor Mendel, and that's why he did not agree with Darwin. He hoped he ran in. There was a conference in London, I believe it was, and they were in the same city, but he did not run into him. And he was talking all sorts of smack. He was saying, man, I hope I run into this guy, because this guy is way off. Like, where is this guy coming from with this whole theory of descent with modification? Like, I've done the experiments. He has not. Like, this theory is ridiculous. And yet, then we adopt evolution. And the evolution theory is the one that's adopted. And then when that's proven false, when there's no possible mechanism, observable mechanism for evolution, then we try to put the two theories together, which is what we call neo-Darwinism, which is now what they believe, that mutations are what causes the slight variations. And through those mutations, natural selection now selects from those mutations, even though natural selection, I guarantee you, selects against mutations. And any entry-level biology student should be able to tell you this, because it's obvious. Our genes, they select against mutations, not for mutations. because mutations are more than likely going to be recessive. Like I only know of one non-recessive mutation, and that's it's the Genghis Khan disease, something about collarbones, and that has to do with the specific way the gene is mutated. But that's the only dominant mutation that I know about. And like I told you about in the earlier video, mutations will always fail out to the wild type. The wild type always wins. We know this. We know, like, if you have a wild type, and we've experienced this. Like I can tell you this because it's really cool. There's I live in Texas, and there's these lizards. I used to have these awesome little green lizards. They were so smooth, so cute, and they were green, so beautiful. And I don't know when these other weird lizards started appearing, but they're like these bumpy lizards, and it's really weird. Like there's these bumpy lizards, and I saw them. I was like, that's a weird looking lizard. And the first time I saw them was maybe a year ago, at most a year ago. And now, guess what? That's the wild type. Every lizard now that I see inherits that specific bumpy trait, and now they're not green anymore. They still change colors, but their primary color, like the color that they walk around in, is not green. It's like a dark brown, brownish green. It's really interesting, but like anyway, all this stuff happens. Like God is showing me these things as I live life to help me understand the wild type wins. That specific lizard, I don't know where he came from, but he's closer to the wild type than the green lizard that I have now. So I don't know how that green lizard came to be. Maybe the founder effect, like some green lizard came from England, and then that green lizard became the dominant type in Texas. I don't know exactly how it happened, but now that we have the dominant type, which is the bumpy green lizard, bumpy brownish dark green lizard. Now every lizard is that lizard. I haven't seen a green lizard in the longest time, like the old type lizard. In order for that lizard to continue to live, he has to mate with a green lizard. But if he mates with the non-green lizard, the wild type lizard, his children are going to be the wild type because that's the dominant type. Wild type is the dominant type, and we know that mutations are not. They're not the wild type. They're not the dominant. They're always going to be recessive. So that's just one of the biggest things. Like you guys don't understand. Like these theories are contradictory, and epigenetics even it makes it worse. Like it just throws everything out the window because then epigenetics is pretty much the rearranging of your genes. Like based on the way your genes are oriented, you run different programs. Like the genes closer to the top are the ones that are going to be easily accessible for the cells to produce those specific proteins. So it has to do with histones. Like I don't know exactly. Like I'd have to research all this stuff again in order to give you an exact demonstration. But this is the dumbed down version. So if I make mistakes, obviously, like I'm trying to dumb it down. But based on the way you live your life and what you do, then your epigenetics is going to not change your DNA, but rearrange your DNA to make to find the information that you need in order to run the proper program. Like it's pretty much like a woman. I'm gonna say that people are gonna get on me for that, but like a man. You know what I'm saying? A man has a gym bag. So if you arrange your gym bag for the things that you put at the bottom, the things that you use the most, to the things that you use the least. So if you play soccer, you have soccer cleats at your top. Then you have, then you're gonna have your towel that you take a shower with, your uniform, you know, all that stuff is at top. And at the bottom, you're gonna have, hey, I'm gonna need Band-Aids. I'm gonna need an extra pair of socks. You know, at the bottom, you're gonna have all the stuff that you don't need all the time. But at the top, you're gonna have the stuff that you do need all the time. It's the same way that your genes work. Like your genes, all the information that you need to live life is in those genes. But based on your environment and what you're introduced to, then your body's going to start looking for the proper genetic program to run, and then it's going to move that genetic program to the top so that you can run those programs more efficiently. And you can see this in everyday life. You can see the results of it. A person, when he gains muscle, you know what I'm saying? Like he's going to have that muscle right away. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not like he's going to go to bed, stop working out for a week, and he's going to lose that muscle because the body knows, hey, maybe he's just having a less stressful week this week. It doesn't mean that he's not going to need those big muscles in the future. And you can experiment with this. You know, you guys, it takes a long time to lose your fitness level. And if it loses instantly, like let's say completely lazy, like you're in bed for a week, you know what I'm saying, bedridden for a week, you gain back that strength really quickly, and it's because your body already remembers that program. It's really weird. I mean, I just can't imagine you guys thinking. I can't imagine atheists looking at even something simple like a bodybuilder and saying, "Hey, this happened randomly." You know what I'm saying? Like his body is remembering. It's not that he's remembering; his genes are remembering what he needs. Like there's so many things that run smoothly that are outside of our conscious control that I can't believe you guys believe that nobody's in control of that. Uh, I mean, you guys know, like, if you ever had a job, you know that when the boss is not there, guess what the people do? They slack off. You know what I'm saying? And guess what? Like, if there's nobody there, nothing happens. Everything starts to deteriorate and degrade. Imagine an abandoned building. You know what I'm saying? Like, how clean is that building going to stay? No, you're going to get rats that are going to move in, and those rats are going to tear stuff up. Roaches are going to move in. The sun is going to constantly degrade it, degrade the paint outside. Like, you can see that abandoned buildings, they don't stay in pristine conditions. And it's the same way you guys with life. Like, come on, just imagine how many processes there are in your body, like physical processes that are outside of your conscious control. And you think nobody's in control of that? That takes a lot more faith than me believing that God is in control. That takes a lot more faith. And then on top of that, you believe that it happened randomly. Like all these things are going to happen randomly. Like the whole conscious control. Like imagine a program. Like how hard is it? Like I don't know if you guys are any computer savvy. Like how hard is it to run a program? You know what I'm saying? And not only that, a sophisticated program that weeds out the bad stuff. And that's what we have in our genes. Like in mitosis, there's certain steps that weed out the bad genes. Like if there's a mutation that happens, that cell will tell itself to die. It's like, no, we can't have that. It's called programmed cell death, apoptosis. So like you guys got to understand, like this is a sophisticated system that God put into place. Otherwise, it's a sophisticated system that came about randomly. And forget that. I mean, you guys imagine the spark of life, because this is the main thing that I want you guys to understand, is if the spark of life came, I have no problem with it coming randomly. The problem is if it comes out randomly and there's nothing protecting it. I don't even know. I don't even know how you guys can even be evolutionists without being theistic evolutionists. Because you know that if a spark of life comes out, everything in life is trying to kill it. You know what I'm saying? Like the sun, it harms the cell, and specifically, I don't even know. Like I don't know how read up you guys are up on this, but the modern theory, the biggest one, the one that's most accepted, is that the protocell, the first cell, came into existence, and it came into existence without a plasma membrane, without a cell membrane. That's the dumbest thing. That's like saying a human being can survive without skin. When I read that, like when I was reading this and I was like, this is backed by 1/4 of scientists and the other ones are backed by lesser numbers, I was like, how on earth could you think a cell could live without a plasma membrane? It's impossible. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't understand how you guys can even be evolutionists without at least being theistic evolutionists. Because there's no way that once the life gets started, that it's going to continue to start. It's going to continue to get more and more complex, especially with all the things that are out to harm that first protocell. And just because you have a protocell, why would that cell divide? You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine by one miracle, one stroke of luck, you get the first protocell. Who says that cell has to divide? Like, that's how life started. Life started with the protocell, but why would that cell divide? Eventually, that cell is going to degrade and die. There would be millions and billions of protocells before you would ever even get to the first protocell that would be actually able to divide. And if it took, life started 4.6 billion years ago. Well, Earth started 4.6 billion years ago. 1.6 billion years after that is when they say life started. I don't know how they get that. That's a ridiculous thing. But either way, if it took 1 billion years for life to start, then that was the first protocell. But you guys got to understand, the first protocell doesn't have to divide. It doesn't have to meiotically divide and become another protocell, and the other protocell, like, oh man, it just falls apart. Like, there's so many things in my brain. I don't know if people can actually see it. Like, why would it divide? And then on top of that, if it divides, why would it survive? Why would it continue to divide? And then mutations happen on that protocell, so it doesn't have DNA because they say that the first protocell only had RNA, which is a single strand, and it has the nucleotide uracil rather than thiamine. How are you going to go from uracil, single-stranded RNA, to thiamine in a double-stranded DNA? It doesn't make any sense, guys. Like these are foundational things for the theory of evolution, and you guys have not addressed these issues. All you guys have is the one experiment that ran that made amino acids. Well, that's fine. You made an amino acid, but I would have been much more convinced if you were able to make not only RNA, a single-stranded RNA that was functional, but a double-stranded DNA that was also functional. You guys don't understand. Like, they made a building block of a car. That's like a person. I can mold because they didn't. I can think of Frankenstein. You can gather a bunch of dead particles. You can gather a bunch of dead human body parts and sew them together, but you still don't have the spark of life. And that's what they did. They gathered bits that go into the body, but they didn't gather the primary things that make those bits. Because again, RNA codes for proteins, and proteins are made up of amino acids. Of course, DNA becomes RNA, and then RNA is the middleman between those two things. But anyway, you guys don't understand. They haven't performed a cohesive experiment because all they have are like Legos. You know what I'm saying? They don't have anything to make those Legos come alive. If they were to perform an experiment and make RNA or DNA, and that DNA was functional, then that would be an amazing thing. It's possible then, but it's impossible under those conditions. Like, you guys have to understand, like, God put these things together. Like, these are systems. These are, oh man, it's called transcription and translation for a reason. You transcribe yourself from one thing, it's transcribed into a different thing, and then it's translated into another totally different language. Like, the reason they're called transcription and translation is because they're so similar to language. Like, you transcribe language and you translate language. Like, the genetic code is not a random bunch of like nonsense. It's understanding and it's information, and we know that it's based on that. Like, they took glow, like they were able to make jellyfish glow. They took a glow-in-the-dark section because they found out, hey, this is the genetic section that makes this particular species glow, and they put it in jellyfish, and they made glow-in-the-dark jellyfish. You know what I'm saying? They can make glow-in-the-dark. Now with that information, they can make glow-in-the-dark pretty much a bunch of stuff. And that's not random. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a specific word in a specific sentence. Once you place a specific sentence in this specific organism, it changes the organism. And that's what I want you guys to understand. Like, these are words. Like, if you look at it like words, then you can start thinking, man, this is ridiculous. How on earth could this have come from nothing? And I said this is going to be about Age of the Earth, and I got distracted because, again, I'm a biology guy. Like, I'm a biology major, and I get distracted with biology. So let me try to get back to the Age of the Earth. I'm going to try to get back to it because, again, this is the theory part. Like, my theory is that God made the genetic language. It's a code, it's a genetic language. And I understand that if you put certain, like, this is how splicing works. Like, you cut off one individual's specific genetic traits and you put that into, like, if you know what it is, and you put that into another organism at the right location, and then you might get the results that you want. And that's based on intelligence. You see what I'm saying? Like, we're not reverse engineering anything. We understand, hey, we look at these chromosomes, this specific gene that makes, and it's a simple gene that makes them glow, has to do with the specific protein that the species makes. That's what makes the organism glow. And all they did was find that protein. Well, they had to find out what made that organism glow. They found that what made it glow was a specific protein. Then they found the genetic information that made that specific protein, and then all they had to do was cut that out and insert it into a comparable chromosome on a new genetic organism. That's how they did it. You know what I'm saying? It's the same way. It's the same way we do, like when you write papers. If you write a paper, a research paper, you're looking for some information that fits what you're trying to say. You look for that, you cut and paste, and put it into your then new research paper. But if it was all genetically random, like this wouldn't be possible. You know what I'm saying? Like, what mutation led to that specific protein being produced, and what were the and you can't have that because the proto-organism did not have DNA. Um, that's crazy. If the proto-organism did not have DNA, I don't even see how it's even possible for everything to come from that proto-organism. Um, However you get it, man, I don't even see how you get from a prokaryote to a eukaryote. Like, it's impossible. Like, you have all these membrane-bound organelles within a eukaryote that's not within a prokaryote. Like, genes are going to dictate that. How do you go from a nucleoid to a nucleus? You know what I'm saying? Like, oh man, I don't understand you guys. Like, there's so many flaws on just a foundational level that I can't see y'all swallowing this wholesale. One of the big things is time, dude. Like, if you imagine, because 5,000 years and horses are still horses. You know, 5,000 years of human history, and you breed a horse and you still get a horse. I go to a Korean church. They have this idea that the first emperor of Korea was born from a dragon's egg. I believe it's a dragon's egg. You know what I'm saying? And we look at that and we don't say that that's science. We say that that's a myth. Why do we say that? Because we know that's not the way it works. We observe human beings being born from other human beings. So why would we assume that human beings were somehow born from a different type of human being? And not even a human being, like a different species. Something closely related to a chimp or a monkey. You don't see that in life. And again, if we really did come from monkeys, we would be able to interbreed with monkeys. And we can't. I mentioned that in the last video. You guys, you can't interbreed with monkeys. That's impossible. They've tried it already. There was an experiment run in Florida, and there was an experiment run in California, and they were unable to crossbreed these organisms. So, man, like, just start questioning things like, why do people believe that the Earth is millions and billions of years old? And they believed it before the actual science came out that supported it. I don't agree with the science, obviously, but at least have the science there. It's not like it was contemporaneous. You know what I'm saying? We didn't fully understand genes until the 1950s, 1960s, and yet here it was Darwin in ignorance proposing his theory of evolution. It's not like when all of a sudden we started understanding genes that it was like, oh snap, these things mixed together, because they didn't mix in the beginning. It's either descent with modification or it's genetic inheritance. And there is no such thing as descent with modification. Like, yeah, the two individuals that you have, parent and child, they're different. You can say that was a modification, but no, it's really not. The information that's in me, it came from somewhere, and it came from either my mom's genome or my dad's genome. You know what I'm saying? Like, black hair, where did it come from? Dad's side of the family. You know what I'm saying? My dad has black hair. He has dark hair. My mom has lighter hair. So I have dark hair. It came from his side of the family, not hers. Obviously, I inherited two alleles, but the darker hair was a dominant trait. There is no modification. You know what I'm saying? They propose mutations, and again, this is the biggest thing, guys. You guys can't get past this. Mutations are recessive. Everything is drowned out in the genetic pool. Like, there's no way you're going to have these mutations. All those organisms would have to die instantly. I had one lizard outside that was brown, and now all the lizards outside are brown because he has the dominant type. And it's the same way. Mutations are not dominant. They're going to get drowned out in the genetic pool. Evolution, I mean, it's a dead theory. Like, it started out dead. It started out in ignorance. There was no observation to support it. All he saw was, first he saw a bunch of different kinds of bones in the ground. Like, oh, and he was like, I don't see these bones today. And he was like, oh, well, all these organisms must have come from a single organism. Where did he get that from? You know what I'm saying? That's pretty much the tree of life. Like, people used to believe that everything came from a tree. You know what I'm saying? And that we all descended down from that tree. Interesting thought. Nothing to prove it. The same with Darwin. It's an interesting thought. We could all come from a single organism, but there's nothing to prove it. where did certain genes originate? For instance, that gene that makes the species glow in the dark. How did it start? What mutation led to that arising? What? Ask yourself, man. Like, and you have to do that for every single section of the genome. And then eventually you start understanding you wouldn't be able to make enough. Like there's not enough information in the first organisms in order to make all that's made now. It's not like, because you have to understand it's either it was a complete language that is being degraded over time, which is what I believe. Like God made Adam. Adam had all the information. Like Adam was the best. Like he had all the information that man needed in order to continue living. That was Adam. And as time went on, we lost genetic information. Genetic information was passed down, but it was lost. It wasn't preserved. Because he had all the information. His wife had all the information. They got together. And then their children had varying combinations of the father and the mother. And it wasn't always there. So I want you guys to understand you lose information as time goes on. You're not gaining information. And that's why they say that sexual reproduction is so beneficial to organisms in crisis, because it could be that they have genetic information that could help them survive the crisis, whereas you might not. So, I mean, there's simple things like, I don't know if you guys ever heard, but there's an Aboriginal tribe that was found, and they had a chemical structure within their blood because they walk around naked, and it gets really cold on that island, and they walk around naked, completely fine. And when they examined their blood, they found a chemical similar to antifreeze. You know what I'm saying? Like, where did that come from? You know what I'm saying? It just so happens that they need it and they have it. I think that's more suitable. It suits more with my definition of the understanding of the world, that God made everything. He knew what human beings were going to go through, and that's why he said that this generation will not pass away until he comes back. Like, the human race is not going to pass away until God comes back, because every single thing we need in order to survive is within our DNA. God programmed it that way. He knew that some organisms were going to go to cold places and not have the technology in order to be able to cover themselves. So what did he do? He put the information in order for an antifreeze type molecule to circulate throughout their blood. Ridiculous, but it's there. You know what I'm saying? Like, how did that? It just so happened that they needed it, and they mutated and then they survived. Come on, guys, it doesn't work that way. You guys know, like, I mean, you guys have to be intellectually stunted or intellectually biased in order to honestly look at that situation and say, this is more probable. It's more probable that it happened randomly than it happened by God, by someone actually planning it. And again, if you guys read this stuff, man, like, if you guys, oh man, like if you read any sort of historical text, when the people wrote about the Native American Indians, it was ridiculous. Like they wrote about them like they were superhuman. Like literally, I was helping someone with a report, and I was reading this book, and it was talking about Indians. It said that they had keener sense of hearing than dogs, and they had a keener sense of smell than bloodhounds. That they were able to smell the feces of a specific deer from like 2 to 3 miles away, and they were able to hear the slightest shift of leaves, and no one else could hear it. Like, they went hunting, like these particular European people went hunting with these guys, and they realized that what we were doing was we were making ourselves worse. Like, it was awesome. Like, if you read these things, it's like, man, I want to do that. And how did they do that? It's not that they were possibly they were born with a specific genetic material that they had, or we might still have that genetic information within our own DNA, and all we have to do to unlock it is put ourselves in a situation where we need it. And that's what we do. Like, when we exercise, we're exposing ourselves to a specific stressor in order to unlock the potential within our own genetics. That's literally what exercise does. Even though you guys may not understand it, all you know is that you're getting bigger, you're looking thinner, like whatever, vanity. But that's what's happening. You guys are literally putting yourselves in a specific stressful condition in order for your body to adapt to that new stress. And that's what these Indians had to do. They had to hear like dogs. they had to smell like dogs in order to survive, and they needed it, so their body found the specific genetic program in order to run it. That's what it happens, dude. Like, honestly, like, ask yourself, are we doing ourselves any sort of favor? Because honestly, like, whether you believe in evolution or not, because if you did believe in evolution, you would not believe in a house. Like, right now, I'm under a roof. Like, if I believe in evolution, forget that. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to live outside so that I can adapt to the environment and I can have a better quality, so I can be a better quality organism rather than making things easier. But we don't do that. We don't live life that way. Because we're like our bodies. We want the easier route. Like, your body's the same way. Your body wants to conserve energy. That's why it doesn't take one workout session in order to perform growth, because your body's like, oh, that was just a one-time thing. You know what I'm saying? It wants to conserve that energy. It doesn't want to make those. It doesn't want to run those new programs. Again, everything that you experience in your daily life, it supports the idea that God made you. And just watch the other video, guys. Like, I wish I could stay on topic with the whole age of the earth, but just remember, your sense of observation is false. If your sense of observation is fallible, again, it's not always false. Like, you observe something, you may not observe it in the truest sense, but you observe it, it's generally considered to be true. But you can't know that. So your observation is fallible, so therefore your theories could also be fallible. And then your experiments. Once you run an experiment, the tools you run to the experiment also have to be infallible. Like, nothing in science is infallible. You know what I'm saying? And then you can just ask yourself, has God ever failed you? You know what I'm saying? There may be some certain things that God does and you don't understand it, but has he ever failed you? Has he ever said, this is going to come to pass, and it didn't come to pass? And the answer is going to be no. Like, God doesn't fail. The closest thing he came to failing was dying on the cross. And that he did that for you. He did that for you to continue living. And there was such a wonderful thing that came from that failure. And it's the same with all of our failures in life. You know, your failures, God works out for your good. So I want you guys to understand that God doesn't fail. You're putting your trust in fallible human beings just because they say they know. They can say it with a great amount of arrogance in their voice, but that's all I hear is arrogance. How on earth are you going to tell me the earth is millions and billions of years old? What led you to that conclusion? At least I can say, look, I'm going based on human history. You guys are going based on something prehistory. Prehistory, tell me exactly how you came up with the idea of prehistory. No one was there to record it. Like, thousands of records, Chinese records are a little different. Chinese have they believe Earth is a little older based on their history, but it never goes into the millions. It never goes into the 100,000s, let alone the millions and the billions. So I want you guys to understand, it doesn't work that way. Like, at least when I tell you I have the Earth is less than 6,000 years old, I have at least one supporting person. Well, I have God supporting me, number one. He told you the Earth is six, like he gave it to you already. And then on top of that, I have the history, the Jewish history. Jewish people have been counting the years, and they say the Earth is 5,777 years old. And on top of that, multiple other calendars say that. In order to get millions and billions of years old, you have to go with something outside of recorded history. And can you trust that? Can you trust the instruments that scientists are using? Especially when it seems like all these things only came out to prove the theory of evolution. It didn't come out like they were trying to prove the Earth was old. They found, this is the way I see it. Again, you guys can say, no, this didn't happen, especially if you guys are atheists. No, it didn't happen that way. Like, whatever, you guys can say that. And again, if I'm being 100% honest, like, I believe Satan was leading these specific scientists in order to come out with these ridiculous things. But it's not that the truth is hidden, because the truth is not hidden. Some very basic thing that might help you skeptics understand where I'm coming from is you never have a pure sample. If I give you a sample of potassium argon, how do I know that the other molecules, that the other atoms of that potassium are not messing with the readings? How do I know it's a pure sample of potassium argon? And does that affect things? Like, if I hold one sample of potassium argon from let's say Texas and one sample of potassium argon from Mississippi, and I bring them together and we measure them and we try to radiometrically date one of the samples when they're right next to each other, does that affect the sample? Does that affect the reading? I want you guys to ask yourself that, because if it does, then the same thing could be true within the one specific sample. Just because you have one sample from one specific place, it doesn't mean that that specific sample is going to be 100% correct. Like 100% of the same sample of the same source, it started aging at the same time. And if it doesn't, then does that affect the age recorded? Does that affect the half-life? These are just things that I found. Like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, but these are just problems that I found with the specific theory, is with the specific way that they measure the time. And another thing is, how do you know when it's full? Like for carbon-14, like we have this half-life. We believe the half-life is every 5,782 years of carbon. For carbon to turn from carbon 14 to carbon 12, I believe is the way it goes. So radioactive carbon, so it turns from carbon 14 into basic regular carbon, into carbon 12. So the radioactive isotope is carbon 14. It radio decays from carbon 14 into carbon 12. Half of the original carbon 14 is going to be there 5,782 years later. So anyway, what I would say is, for those specific things, how do you get the full measure? How do you know the full life, like the full of it? 5,782 years, that could extend on into millions and billions of years. So just because the half-life of a specific of potassium argon is millions, and I think it's like it's millions. It's in the millions. The half-life for potassium argon. How do you know it was ever full? Is my question. That's the thing, is you can't know. The only thing that I could possibly conceive, because again, when I conceive theories, I don't just say this is the way it is. I try to critically analyze my own theory, and I criticize my own theory. Like, again, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So what am I doing when I propose a theory? I try to find the evidence against my theory before I even speak it out. So the evidence against this theory is, obviously, they could synthesize a brand new. They could make brand new carbon 14, and then see how long it has to decay. Again, no one sits down there. No one is sitting down there counting it. All they do is they find an average number, and then they multiply that by a certain amount. But again, how do you know when it was full? So what I said is like, oh, okay. So they somehow find a way to turn regular potassium into argon. So, and then they start measuring it from there, and then that's assuming that's full. But again, that's something synthetic. If you made it synthetically, it's not the same as in nature. And we know that because at least we ran one experiment, the amino acid one that I referred to you for the first proto-organism, that made amino acids that were right-handed rather than left-handed. So we know that things that are made synthetically are not the same as things that are made in nature. So if it was full at millions of years old, you know, when you first made it, that's a different type of full than it would be in nature. And again, are there certain things that make it age faster? Carbon-14 samples have to be preserved. You guys know what I'm saying? Like you don't fully understand this because you don't do the science. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not the science person. You're not the one that experiments with this. You know what I'm saying? Like you take a carbon sample, and depending on the conditions it was found, you take any sample based on what you're doing, like whatever you're trying to research. I'm thinking of bones in my mind. That's why I said carbon-14. But if you take a carbon sample from this particular bone, depending on what it did, it's gonna yield different results. Like if I fry a chicken bone, like this is just an example, carbon-14. So let's assume I kill a bird. I kill a chicken. I buy a chicken from Popeyes. You know what I'm saying? I take those bones to be carbon dated, and I give those to the person. You know what I'm saying? And then he carbon dates those bones. It's not going to give the same rating as if the bone had died, as if the chicken had died in the ground by itself. It just won't, because it's been exposed to a different environment. If I fry, because again they fry the chicken at 375 degrees at at Popeyes. I'm assuming that's a standard frying temperature. But once they fry that chicken, it's not going to yield the same carbon-14 results. And it's the same with anything that you find in nature. You never have a pure, isolated environment in nature. So anything that you say, anything that they find within the dirt and the ground, I already say has already been tampered with. It's already a tainted sample because it's in nature. It's not in a controlled environment. And this is how science runs. Science runs in controlled environments, guys. You got to understand. Carbon-14 dating, you can just throw it out the window. Potassium argon dating, throw it out the window, depending on the site that you find it on. And that's what they do. They literally throw these things out the window, and they have to sometimes because they find different dates every time they date something. Why are they going to do that? The answer is simple, because it doesn't fit their understanding of it. So they have a certain understanding of the way it should work, and then they throw out that sample. If they reported all the samples that they found and all the samples that they tested, you guys would not be on board with this, because they find different numbers for all sorts of things. And if you can't trust it now, if I'm able to throw so much shade on this particular way of measuring the age now, imagine, dude, just imagine you putting your trust on this, trusting this rather than trusting God. This is for the Christian. For the skeptic, hey, do what you want. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're putting all your faith into this thing that you cannot see. You've never observed this, and yet you're trusting the science. Just because you understand it, yeah, it could make some sense. I understand what they're doing. They're counting the half-lives. I understand half-lives. I understand that they're counting them. They're counting backwards, and they're saying this is how old something is. I understand that. But how do you know it was ever full? How do you know? Because again, God could have created it not full. And we see that with many things in life. You know what I'm saying? Like, was Adam a baby? God didn't create Adam a baby. You know what I'm saying? God created Adam a full-blown man. Was it ever full? Just because it decays every 3 million years, that just means it's one of the more stable elements. What difference does that make? You know what I'm saying? Because it decays every 3 million years? What if it was exposed to something? You know what I'm saying? What if the flood somehow changed the measurement? Again, like frying a chicken bone. It's going to age. It's going to read a different age than what's actually there. Why? Because it's been exposed to a different environment. It's the same way with any potassium argon. Who cares if the half-life is millions and billions of years old? Does that mean the Earth is that old? Just because you can measure it doesn't mean that's true. Again, like a candle. You have let's say you have a light bulb, whatever. It doesn't matter what you use. If you have a light bulb, you know what I'm saying? And you're trying to measure how long the light bulb is. If I measure it in regular light, you know what I'm saying? The regular usage, hey, it lasts this long. But can you imagine if I get up? You know what I'm saying? I get up and I try to see how long the light bulb lasts, and I'm doing this with the light, turning it on and off, on and off, on and off. Eventually, that's gonna make the thing wear out faster. And I want you guys to understand that's the same way with anything you find in nature. Like if it's near an ocean, you know what I'm saying? If it gets there's a bunch of things, you know, if it's under pressure, there's a bunch of things that change the rate of decay. And we know the rate of decay can change. Otherwise, we wouldn't get such different samples. And again, oh man, this is it's a stupid way of measuring time. It's a stupid way of measuring time. It takes so much faith, and I don't think it's been proven. Because again, there's been nothing, everything in science that I like accepting or that I'm willing to accept normally has some sort of application. This has zero application. There's no reason for them to question it because it has absolutely no scientific application. Anytime you have truth, some sort of measure of progress comes along with that truth. And that's why science is so awesome, because we discover truth. Again, we can't know it's truth. Like I told you already, I'm a moderate skeptic. I don't believe I know anything. All of our things are beliefs. But basically, what I'm trying to get across is, look, when you discover truth, some sort of measure of progress comes with that truth. And then as you measure the progress, then it's a sort of self-correcting system. You guys start understanding more about the truth, and you guys start modifying things. So in other words, light bulbs weren't always this awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like when they discovered how to make light, then Of course, numerous companies got in contact with that, came into contact with that specific information. Then they started making modifications, and now we have light bulbs that'll last a super long time rather than just 2 years or a year or whatever, however long light bulbs lasted back then versus now. You see what I'm saying? Like, but there is no continued improvement in this specific area of science. They're not continually improving upon the process of radiometric dating. It was introduced back then, and now it's continued to the same degree, and there's no scientific, there's no quality of life improvement from that specific scientific area. And it's the same with evolution, guys. Like, evolution does not lead to any sort of progress. In fact, I believe it leads to de-evolution in society. Like, if you guys honestly believe that we all came from a single-celled organism and we somehow lived from apes, why don't you guys like actually try to nurture apes? Like, if you guys honestly believe that we came from apes, then nurture apes and try to help them live as human beings, because maybe another species of human beings will come from them. Or why even kill and eat animals? I know you guys are hypocrites. If you guys believe that we came from animals, then why aren't you guys vegan? Like, honor all sorts of life, or don't eat at all, because plants were here before human beings. Why do you guys eat plants? In that specific plant is the genetic information that could be mutated. Again, this is not true, but in that specific plant, it could eventually mutate another billion years and become a human being. Why not? Why do you guys do that? You guys are killing potential human beings. You guys don't live life that way. No one has ever lived life that way, because we get our information from our parents, and that eventually goes back down to Noah. Noah knew that animals were made in subjection to human beings, and he decided, like God said, it was okay for him to eat animals. That's why we eat animals. That's what I believe. You know what I'm saying? Like, why do we think our life is worth more than theirs? Comes from Noah. But if this is true, if the theory of evolution is true, then all life is on the same plane, and you shouldn't eat animals, and you shouldn't eat plants, because in that is like based on your morality. Again, if you think that human life is not worth preserving, or potential of human life is not worth preserving, then you're a homicidal maniac. Like, why even be? You're crazy. You know what I'm saying? And you do this. You know what I'm saying? You do this for your future children. Like, you buy things for a possibility of having a family in the future. Human beings live like that. Now, if you're preparing for a human being life, it's going to happen maybe 10 years down the road, 5, 2, whatever, 3 years down the road. Then why don't you prepare billions and millions of years down the road and start protecting the life of plants, the life of animals? They have the possibility of becoming human beings, especially the life of chimps. Chimps should live like royalty if you're an evolutionist. Why not? They're the closest things to human beings, and possibly a human being could arise from that. And that's only based on your understanding, because again, you could have a super intelligent species that looks nothing like human beings. What if in a million years cattle become a super intelligent species? So in that understanding, you would have to preserve all forms of life, because in all forms of life are the potential to become one of us. And that's not the way it works. So these are just foundational things. Like, you guys don't sit around and do this. Like, I love doing philosophy. Like, in my mind, this stuff is the stuff that's satisfying. It's intellectually satisfying, looking at a theory, taking it to its logical conclusion. Do that. Do that for the theory of evolution. You'll find you're a hypocrite. Why would you eat meat? Why would you eat, again, these things have been ingrained in you, but once you find out the truth, go in the direction of the truth. If you believe evolution is the truth, don't eat meat. Simple. But you guys are unwilling to do that. I think you guys have just adopted this specific way of understanding the world because it fits with what you believe now. But seek the truth, bro. I guarantee you'll find something. And if you guys have never thought this intently or this critically about your own theory, then you really don't even have a sustainable belief. Like, I've considered what it is that I believe, and I've considered it with great pains. Like, I've been kicked out of churches before. You know what I'm saying? Does that shake my faith? No. Why? Because I believe God. I believe He's working everything out for my good, and it ends up happening. Like, I end up seeing it in my life. Like, you guys gotta understand this, the walk of faith is not a simple one for me. Like, it's definitely not. I suffer tremendously. For doing what God wants me to do, you suffer tremendously. But that's exactly what he says will happen. I can't point the finger and say, hey, you're wrong, when literally he says, if they hate you for a reason because they've hated me. And if you guys watch this video and you guys can't understand why you guys are so upset, it's because you've hated Jesus. There's something in you that naturally hates Jesus. I've been there. I used to not be a Christian, and every time someone would talk to me about God, specifically Jesus, I did not want to hear it. I wanted to shut it out. Why? That was my innate human nature. God talks about that. Like, I understood once I read in Romans, you know what I'm saying, about the spirit and the flesh, that they're contrary to one another. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understood. I was like, oh, snap. This is why I hated talking about God before I was a Christian. This is why I hated my brother talking to me about Jesus before I was a Christian. And it didn't matter if atheist or not atheist. I didn't like it. It made me uncomfortable. And it was because of my specific nature. So there's very many things that agree. Like, what I see in life is what I agree with God. You know what I'm saying? Like, I read what he tells me is true, and then I'm like, oh, snap, this is true. And sometimes God shows me something that's true, and it's like, oh, snap, like, I see it in life, like it happens later. So just think a little more critically. I can't believe I burped on camera. Just think a little more critically, and if you're a Christian, trust God. If he's been there with you through the hard times, he's going to continue to be there with you. But again, seek the truth, man. To be honest, 100% honest, just seek the truth. Just because something makes sense doesn't mean it's true. Again, I understand the theory of evolution, and I understand the problems and the upsides. I don't see a single upside to the theory of evolution, man, to be 100% honest, because I see the theory of genetics and the theory of evolution as contradictory. So I don't see a single upside to evolution. But just pray about it if you're a Christian, and do some research, man. Like, honestly, like, if you can't, ask God and he'll give you the criticisms. Like, I didn't have a single criticism for the age of the earth when my friend told me, hey, do you believe the earth is such and such years old? And then as I made the video, God gave me another witness. And I can't believe I never understood this, but like, come on, I have witnesses. Like, historical cultures, they were taking the time and they say it's this amount of years old. Like, but if you believe that the earth is older than that and there exists such a thing as prehistory, you have to prove it to me. Prove to me prehistory. You know what I'm saying? And I would prefer you prove to me prehistory historically. Like, if you find some sort of ancient document where people are developing, they're developing intelligence, and they're talking about their previous, their ancestors that aren't intelligent, then that would help me understand. Like, if we find some sort of historical document that says, oh, look at these people that are not as evolved as we are. And again, Aborigines don't count. Like, I already told you, Indians were thought to be stupid and simple, and they were superhuman, according to hunting. You know what I'm saying? Just because they didn't have technology, man, forget technology. I'd rather be Superman than Iron Man. That's super cute. I like that. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, what would you want to rather be? You'd rather be Superman, not Iron Man. You'd rather be innately strong rather than strong because of technology. And that's the thing is, we just don't think about these things. But love and peace in Jesus, bro. Just pray about it. Bye.